Hello, ladies and gentlemen. CaptainShack here, and welcome back to Star Wars, the GM tip series that I've been producing here on the XP Gamers. This is episode 2. There's a lot of episodes that I want to produce, but I've realized that the first thing that I've got to do is I have to get through some of the base mechanics, particularly in the tabletop version that I enjoy playing, which is Star Wars, Fantasy Flight Game Star Wars Edge of the Empire in all of its different versions. So this will in no way be a replacement for the rulebook itself or any of the rulebooks. There are 3 different versions of it. Really, you only just need one of them. But it will be a descriptor of what makes this system very, very, very unique, very cool, which is mostly it's the narrative dice, but it is something that has to be a little overcome, especially if you're coming from the D20 tabletop experience. So today we're going to be talking about combat, because combat is fun, and combat is going to let your characters shine in actually, blaster fire and flying ships, and these rules for combat and how the narrative dice system works is the core of this game, really. So we're going to talk about the narrative dice first, and then go into the basics of combat. So welcome. Let's get started. So behind me, if we switch over, I have Tabletop Simulator. Now, there's a ton of ways to play Star Wars FFG. Best way probably be at a table with friends if you can. You can always use the D20 system, which allows you to play remotely. Or you could do what I do, and I use Tabletop Simulator and a variety of assets and pieces that I pieced together off of Google Images through the workshop, which is a great resource. Lots of cool custom stuff in there. But at the end of the day, all you really need is a set of dice, way to roll, and most importantly, this rulebook, one of these rulebooks. So, and of course, I've mentioned this before in episode 1. These rulebooks there are 3 different versions of it. One is for Force users and has a lot more to do with the Force, and has a few unique things in them that are different from the other books. But for the most part, it's mostly the fluff stuff, the NPCs and the stats that they give you for them, and then of course the character classes that are in here, or the specializations that are in here that are different. Those are the big deals. All right, and we'll go into the differences between the 3 rule books in another episode, and which one's probably the one you want to lean toward depending on the kind of campaign you want to run. And then there's tons of expansion books. But anywho, I am not sponsored by FFG in any way. I just really enjoy the product. I think these books are amazingly high quality, and I think the lore bits that they give you in these books are really, really entertaining. But let's get into what makes the FFG system. And you're going to see me looking down a lot because I'm looking at my screen below me here. What makes this system really cool? And the thing that I think makes it really unique is the narrative dice system. So normally, and we'll zoom in here, this is from an actual session that I had with my players. We're just going to move them over and out of the way. Just little icons to help keep everybody's position in order, so everybody can visualize exactly where they are. And this was the marching order for them going through. I think it was a very, very tight city street, or it was like a pipe or something. And I was like, okay, what order are you going in? I need to know who's in front and who's in back, and where the other NPCs are. So we do like to use some kind of indicator. You don't have to. The whole thing is narrative and can be done theater of the mind style. But anyways, in your normal D20 D&D style game, if I go to components here, I can actually load in some dice. We'll go plastic dice, and we'll pull out a D20. You have your D20, and this represents that random chance and your character skills mixed into one number. The GM will pick a DC, and then you'll roll against it with normally your D20, and then if you pass that DC, say it was an 11, and then you've now made your jump across the chasm, or you've managed to hit if it's an AC in combat, you use the D20. In this system, in the FFG system here, you use narrative dice, and and you can find these over on their website. They also have an app that you can use. The narrative dice are these guys, and we're missing a blue. I'm going to steal this from Tabby's little area down there. It is a bit of a mess. Like I said, we actually use this table to play on, and I always save. So there's lots of crap everywhere. We're missing one more dice. My player's favorite dice. They love it when I say upgrade one of those to a red, because that's the difficulty, so the harder it gets. We'll go into what each one of these means, though. So we'll have the skill dice up here. So I will explain what these are, but these are the narrative dice. So instead of having, D10s, D20s, instead of having these, and I love Tabletop Sim because you can actually roll the dice, and that's always fun. It even makes the sound. And I do have the physical dice here with me, and sometimes as a GM, I just like to roll those instead. But these are the dice that you use for this system, the narrative dice. Now, the way this works is you start with every roll that you're going to be doing. You have the difficulty set by the GM or by the rulebook. Some things have a direct difficulty that are established in the book. Or if you're playing a pre-made adventure, and I do have some of those books floating around here, and I think there's even one in the standard rulebook, one or two. But if you're playing a pre-made adventure, that will give you the difficulty that your players will have to roll against. But it's up to the GM to establish the difficulty of what the player is trying to do. So in our example, let's say your players are up on a mountainside and they have to jump over a chasm. And to make it, it's a 500-foot drop and it's windy, right? And they've decided they have to jump over this. This is their shortcut that they're going to take. They're willing to take the risks. Well, then the GM has to set the difficulty. Say it's a fairly far jump. Well, these purple dice represent the default difficulty. 1 dice is an easy roll. It's not that difficult. I even think I have a little cheat sheet here to show you guys. There you go. Bottom right-hand corner here is the range, bands, and difficulty. And this is one of the cheat sheets you can find over on Google. But a single purple is an easy, 2 purples is an average roll, 3 is a hard, and then daunting is a 4. And a 5 should only be attempted at the GM's discretion because it's just so hard to accomplish. So this is your difficulty. So we're going to say it's, relatively hard difficulty. We're going to roll 3 purple dice. But as me as the GM, I'm thinking, well, there's a chance that you guys could fall to your death. And so we need to upgrade this roll. So we're going to upgrade it with 1 red. These are the challenge dice. Actually, nice that they highlight that. This is a challenge dice. The reason that we're upgrading it is because there's a chance of a deadly fall. That this could go catastrophically wrong. And that means this little symbol right here, this little circle with like a triangle in the center of it, that is a despair. That means you just, in D20 kind of rule sets, that means you just rolled a 1. Like, it went really bad. But the cool thing about narrative dice is, unlike the D20, right, where it's pass or fail, okay? In the narrative system, you can fail, but get an advantage out of it. So you can fail with style almost, or you can get a success, but you end up with a lot of threat, meaning something, even though you succeeded, something went catastrophically wrong, like something went wrong and you don't know what it is. You could fail this, or you could roll a despair. A despair means something really bad has happened. And it's up to you as the GM to use the narrative dice to help tell that story. So these are the difficulty dice right here. Your challenge dice and your difficulty dice. This is setting the bar your players have to overcome. Now there are 2 other dice, if we're going to continue with this. The other negative dice, or the other difficulty dice, that players have to overcome is called the setback dice. Now setbacks are added narratively, are something that's happening for the roll, right? That is affecting the roll. I said there were high winds in our example. Well, that would be a setback. This setback dice represents those winds blowing through, right? If they're really high, if there's like a huge storm billowing, right? I say, okay, well, one, you're making this jump and it's muddy. It's hard to get traction. So the mud and the rain is a setback, and now you've got the high winds for once you've made the jump. That's a setback. And you can come up with all kinds of setbacks. As a GM, this is your time to get creative. In almost every role, I set it as a challenge to always have a setback, because in the specializations in the character creation, there are lots of perks, lots of talents that players can buy into with their experience. And I love how you make characters in this. You can make almost any character you can think of in this system with some real granularity to it. But those talents that players can buy into that remove setbacks are no good if you as a GM do not apply setbacks. In almost every role, there should almost always be a setback, unless your players are doing something that requires a difficulty roll. Like say they're hacking into a data pad that's been locked and they want the information inside. If they're doing that in their workshop aboard their ship, and they have no time restraints, can take all the time in the world that they want, and they have perfect lighting, and the ship is in perfect condition, it's not even moving, then okay, no setbacks. But if you're under a firefight and you've got blaster bolts raining around you and hitting the walls as you're trying to hack into a door panel and you have to get through, you know you're gonna die, your party next to you is taking wounds, and there's all kinds of things going around, that's when you start applying those setbacks. You got the difficulty of hacking or cracking that lock, right? Of trying to lockpick that lock. At the same time, all these things around you are happening. That's when the setbacks come into play, and you want to apply those. So you've got your basic difficulty, right? Up to like 5 dice. changing the difficulty easy, hard, as you go on and on and on. And then you've got your upgrade dice that make the roll even harder because of, I always look at the challenge dice for me as how bad could this go? And as a GM, if you're going to have a despair potential there, know what it is. Have an idea of what it is. If you have an idea in your head of why that could go horribly wrong, like they fall down the cliffside, that would be a despair or 2 despairs. I've put rolls in front of players where it's like, look, if you roll 2 despairs on this, you're not going to make it. Like, just bear that in mind with this roll. This is a very difficult, you're trying to do something very high risk, and these are the risks. And it makes those rolls so exciting when they're rolling. They know, okay, if I get 2 despairs on this, my character may be dead. They may just be no coming back from this. And if they choose to do it, everybody goes in eyes open, and everybody's eyes are on those dice. And when that sigh of relief, it's so good. So, difficulty, upgraded to challenge dice, right? And there are some NPC perks that called adversary, which will actually upgrade the difficulty automatically, making your real bad bosses even better, because now you're rolling against reds instead of purples. We'll talk about combat later. The other dice we have here are the opposite of these dice. You have your ability dice, which notice that they're the same shape as the difficulty. These are the counterpoint. Okay, so here's the difficulty you have to overcome. These ability dice represent your character's natural ability. You get these dice based on your character's, as we open this up, statistics, right? So your characteristics. So your brawn, your agility, your intelligence. You can see them all the way here on the top of the bar here. Your cunning, your willpower, your presence. These are your base, born with it, or maybe you have worked out and built those muscles up and you got a lot of brawn. Those are those base stats. Now, the upgrade to these is the proficiencies. These are the yellow dice. So what you do is, when you have a proficiency, these are your skills, by the way, that you've chosen to perk into and upgrade. You've spent XP to define your character and what they're good at. You take these ability dice and you actually upgrade them with skills. That's how these work. So these are the counterpoint to the challenge dice. And much like the counterpoint for challenge dice, if we rotate these, see if I can get one to come up, there's a catastrophic despair. There it is right there on the corner here. There is a triumph, the opposite of that. Now you can, and this is where the narrative dice come in and are really fun. You can fail a roll with a triumph, and now you get to figure out what does that mean in the scene. Your player is planting an explosive device, say, and he's planting it on the side of a leg of an ATST. And when he's arming it and he's trying to be as quiet as possible, there's your setback. He's got enemies maybe roaming around. He's trying to be quiet. It is silent. Any noise could potentially give him away. So boom, I give him a setback. There are enemies wandering around outside that could potentially hear. Upgrade 1 to a red. Despair means you're probably going to be heard. But the main objective is just get this explosive planted and set properly. He could roll, he could fail, but he gets a triumph. And now you have to figure out what does that triumph mean in the roll. He failed it, but something good came out of it. Maybe he triumphed and he wasn't hurt even though he failed it, and now he's got another chance to do it at a lower difficulty. Or a triumph could be that something like he cracks open the door and he succeeds at opening the door. He rolls also a triumph. Not only does he succeed at opening it, but now he can shut it and lock it behind them. He's realized like how to use the interior mechanisms of that door that he's opened, that blast door, to as soon as they get through, boom, he hits it, shuts it, and now with that triumph, the GM can set a difficulty that the NPCs have to overcome. There's a lot of fun with the narrative system that you can come up with. That isn't just pass-fail, or epic fail, or epic success, which is kind of what this is. And the dice help tell the story. So there's your skills. The last one is the counterpoint, if you probably already guessed this, to the setback. This is your boost die. This is your blue die. Why do you get a boost die? Well, boost die is something is giving a one-up on the player's actions. He's getting a helping hand from another player. Somebody's holding that spotlight for him as he's digging deep into the control panel trying to get those blast doors shut. He gets a boost. Or somebody's like handing him tools as he's working hard. Okay, maybe that's how he gets the boost. Or they've done something in the prior round that he got a lot of advantage. And we'll talk about what these symbols mean on these dice. But that's the boost. That is giving you a one-up for some reason. They have the high ground. There's maybe a boost for that. They decide to take that one advantage. They knew an NPC and had helped them in a prior in a prior way in maybe the last session, and they made a very good impression. Okay, well, when they're trying to convince that NPC to do something, give them a boost die for it. There's also lots of talents through this. Through your different specializations that players can pick up to immediately give them boosts. One of my players is a sniper. And I believe he gets boosts on aiming or something like that, where he can use one of his talents to get an extra boost die. If your players in combat decide to use the aim maneuver, where they take a minute, they breathe in and out, and then they pull the trigger. They get that extra boost by using the aim maneuver. We'll talk about stuff like that in combat and how combat rolls are worked. But boost die, lots of different reasons to give your players boost die if they have really creative reasons to get them. So a lot of fun that can be had with those. But there you go. Counterpoints are, you've got your setback, something is happening in the roll that is holding the players back, that isn't directly related to the difficulty. Your boost die, something has happened to give them a one-up, to give them an advantage in this scenario. You've got your difficulty, your base difficulty of how hard that thing is to do in the best circumstances. You've got your natural ability to overcome and to use your born gifts. So, how smart you are, how strong you are, how fast and agile you are, how cunning your character is. And then you've got your learned skills, things that over the course of their lives they have learned to do that augments their ability dice, upgrades their ability. It's actually called an upgrade. So, pretty fun. Of course, and then you've got your challenge dice, upgrading the difficulty. The difficulty is just that much more dangerous, that much harder, because of whatever reason that it deserves a full-on upgrade. And there's a lot of sub-rules and things that come out of this that'll upgrade difficulties. Also, sometimes it's just up to the GM. You got to be like, you're trying to do something that is dangerous and very difficult, and we're going to have to upgrade some dice. And you as a GM, it is your job to know when that is, and to try to be, as I drop my book, try to be consistent. And that's kind of the challenge of being a GM in this system. But those are the different dice. Now let's talk about what's on these dice real fast. So on the dice, you'll notice that there are, even on this boost die, and they're all the same. You've got your explosion symbol on there. And then you've got this, what looks kind of like the Jedi symbol without the lightsaber in the middle. You got these two wings. So this little explosion symbol is considered the success symbol. And then the other one is your advantage. And there is an assortment of these symbols on each one of these dice, of these positive dice. We'll call them the positive dice. So it is success on the star, advantage on the wings. On the we'll call them the negative dice you have, and they're all the same here. You've got this triangle. This is your failure. So you've got success. Let's see if I can roll this so it only has one success on it. I'm not going to let me do it, are you? Well, you got success right here. So there's two success on this one. You've got your failure. Your failure is your opposite from your success. So success and failure used for rolls to actually find out whether or not the thing that they're trying to accomplish is successful or fails. When you roll your dice and you roll this big pack of dice here, you're going to count up all of your successes and all of your failures. And if you have more successes than failures, you succeed at the roll, right? You have accomplished the main goal of the roll. So that's fairly straightforward. That's kind of like whether or not you can get past your DC on a D20, which I rolled a 1. GG me. GG. That would probably be a no. I have bombed it horribly. That is your critical failure on a D20. But so you want to get more successes, and I've only rolled 1 success here. I actually rolled 1 failure. So that means they are equal, and I failed to make the roll. You have to exceed the number of failures. So if you roll no failures and 1 success, you succeed at the thing you're trying to do. If you roll 2 failures and say 3 success, you succeed. If you roll the equal number, 2 failures, say 2 threats on the whole roll, you failed, right? You have to exceed the number of failures that comes up. Now, there are other symbols on here that I talked about earlier. Your advantage symbol, the winged symbol, and then this symbol right here kind of looks like the Republic or the Imperial symbol, right? It looks like a TIE fighter wing. These are called threats. Now, these counteract your, and I'll just move these around here, the threat symbol counteracts your advantage. What does that mean? Well, it means if you get more, say you get more advantage than threat. Say you ended up with 5 advantage and 2 threat. Well, they counteract each other, right? They cancel each other. So that means you ended up with 3 advantage. Advantage is a resource that players can spend or the GM can choose to just use to affect the roll. what happened? What happened in the situation? So it means that you, even though you may have succeeded or failed at the roll, you gain some type of positive benefit if you end up with more advantage. So say you succeeded at opening a door and you got a lot of advantage. Well, if the GM says it's okay, you opened the door quietly and no one heard it happen, right? Or you got so much advantage that, a positive outcome of some kind. And there's a lot of cheat sheets out there to give you some ideas on like how to use some of the advantage. I know for like the leadership skill, we've used, if you get a lot of advantage, you can get an NPC to you may actually affect more of the people that you're talking to in the leadership check. Excuse me, I just hit my mic. So more of them join on with what you're saying and buy into what you're selling as a big leadership role, try to sway the crowd. And if you get well, let me think of another one. If you're pickpocketing and you get a bunch of extra advantage, maybe not only did you succeed at it, right? If you got enough success, you got a lot of advantage, maybe you picked up a little extra credits on the side of whatever else you were grabbing. You grabbed like their credit chip along with something else. There's a lot of fun ways to use that. In combat, advantage is used a ton, and we'll get into more of that later, where you can use it to do all kinds of things. You can get a critical hit with it. You can use it to shoot at a target and have him get thrown out of his cover so that your buddy gets a shot without having the setbacks of that guy being in cover anymore. Or maybe you threw dirt in his eyes and now he can't see, and his next shot's gonna be a little bit harder. He gets a setback because there's now like sand in his eyes from the blast that you threw up into the air, along with the one you clocked into his chest. There's all kinds of stuff you can use this for. We'll go back into that more and deeper examples of these in a later episode, most likely. So we've got successes, which are the stars. We've got advantage. These are the positive things. Then we've got failure, and we've got threat on the dice. Now, the last two things we talked about a little bit already. Triumph, right? There's the Jedi, like the lightsaber symbol with a circle behind it, and despair, which was the circle. They both have a circle, and then they have a symbol in the middle. I'm trying to get the despair to come up here. Okay, well, you can kind of see it if I rotate the camera. There's the despair symbol right there. So here's your triumph, and then there's your despair on the side there, the little circle with the triangle. And we've already talked about these. A triumph is the opposite. Something amazing happens when you're trying to do the thing in combat. That can be a critical hit. So you get an idea. So those are your symbols: threat, advantage, failure, success, and then triumph and despair. Also, your triumph and your despair, those count as a success and a failure to be added in when you're figuring out whether or not you succeeded the roll or failed it. So getting those triumphs is a double hitter. Something awesome happens, which is, up to the GM. You get very comfortable with this very, very fast. And then a despair, obviously. Something terrible happens, and it's one more point toward failing the roll completely. So those are the dice rolls right there. Now, we've had a lot of fun with these in a lot of different ways. We got a little car here. So in a chase scene, we have had, somebody's skills putting together. Let's say it's Shaw here. Shaw has, with the light ray, planetary piloting. That's your ground vehicle piloting, which is going to use her skills as an example. That would be 3 grain because she has 3 agility. Agility, AG. Is your base piloting characteristic. This is you're just fast on your reflexes. It makes you a really good pilot. But she's also been trained a little bit at driving vehicles. So she's got 1 skill into it. She's bought into 1 skill. Okay, so we know what she's rolling. Against a piloting check, she's running toward a canyon entranceway, and she wants to make sure that she beelines it right through with barely enough space to make it through. She says, okay, well, I want to try to go through the tightest space that I think my vehicle can make it. I said, okay, you're being chased. Let's get your skills out here. And there we go. There's that. And then, okay, it's a really tight fit. If you really want to do this, it's a little scary. It's an average check, right? Or maybe it's a hard check. So we'll do 3 purples, but there is a chance that you're going to crash, like you're going to hit that wall hard. You're going to crash beeline right into it. So we're going to upgrade one of those purples to a red. And in the prior round, somebody said that, I want to use my advantage. Somebody next to her says, I'm co-pilot here. I want to give her a hand. It's like, okay, you're counting. He says, I'm gonna count down until we have to make the hard turn into the canyonway. It's like, okay, well, I'll give you a boost because you're helping out, sure. but you're kicking up a lot of dust, so there's a setback. You add some setbacks in there. The speed of the pilot check actually, I think, adds in setbacks based on the maneuverability of the vehicle. We'll go to vehicles later. But we add a setback for one reason or another. And now, boom, you do the roll, and does she fail to succeed? She's heading toward that entranceway, rolled with her skills, 3 successes, the star, and 2 advantage. But rolled up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threat. 6 threat on this piloting check to see if you can beeline through two pillars or rock walls or something. So what does this mean? Character Shaw, makes it through the entranceway to this canyon that's super tight, but with the extra threat, and that's a lot of threat. That's 2 advantage, so knock off 2 of those, so it ends up being 4 threat. Narratively, I'd probably say, but what you didn't realize was that the canyon doesn't actually get wider, it gets narrower as you continue down the pathway. You make it through with just inches to spare, and it does expand a little bit, but as you get farther and farther, the canyon walls start to close in and close in and close in. And that could, and I'm like, all right, well, we'll get back to that in the next roll, because the guys who are following you now have to roll against the same thing because they're chasing behind you. And there's the fun chase kind of narrative thing. So they'll roll and see how they do, and it looks like they actually, surprisingly, make it through, and they also ended up with no threat. It looks like completely canceled the threat. And so they make it through no problem, but their vehicle's a little bit skinnier, so they can blast right through it. And even though it's getting tighter and tighter, they seem to be driving just fine. So you can have all kinds of fun with how these narrative dice work. And one of the fun things to do with this, as a GM, mind you, and you get more and more comfortable as you go, is the setbacks. Watch these setbacks and see what they roll, because this can help you tell the story. If they fail because of a setback turns up a failure, and there are 2 blank sides on the setback, so a lot of times you'll get blanks. But if they do fail, describe, if you said the setback was there because they're being chased in the rain and it's making it hard to see the road, describe how the rain threw them off the road or made them fail that whatever they're trying to accomplish, because that's what they're there for. They're the narrative dice. They're there to, whatever you put those in there for, whatever reason, the winds are high as your sniper lines up his shot, and you put a setback on it. If he fails that shot and he got a roll negative on a setback dice, talk about how the winds kicked up just before he shot, just before he pulled the trigger. There's a lot of fun that you can have with these, but that's the basics. That's the basics for the narrative dice system. As you play, as you read through the rule book, you're going to learn a lot about different ways to use this system, and how it intersects everything you do when you play. Character skills, NPC talents. All of this stuff affects this dice system to allow you to have more than just a yay or nay, they succeed, they fail. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. And it can be frustrating starting out because there's a lot here and there's a lot to figure out. And sometimes you want to just go. And if they only roll 1 threat or one advantage, and if you're in a time crunch and it's not that big of important of a roll, then just kind of hand wave it. Just go through it. You're the GM. You set the pace. Go. If it's a really big roll, though, and it really matters, and the fun thing about this is when you're giving the difficulties, I like to let the players roll the dice themselves. They see what they're up against. They understand how hard that roll was. And when they succeed or when they bomb it, the whole table is sitting there watching the roll and seeing how it goes. And the fun thing is, with the narrative dice system, normally in D&D, it's up to the GM to describe what's happening. It's up for them to say, okay, well, I set the DC in my head. The players didn't even know what it was. They failed it with a 19. And then the GM describes what happened. In this system, my players, when they fail a roll with a bunch of threat, a lot of times, before I even get the words out, they go, if GM will allow, I love those words, if the GM will allow, with all that threat, this is how I like to see my character fail. And they'll describe something that may even be worse than what I was coming up with, but it'll be narratively more impactful. Wolven, he fails horribly on a roll for his sword swing, and he tells me, when I came down with that second blow, the sword gets caught in a rock and it carves in a little bit with the vibroblade, and I have it stuck and I can't get it out for the second swing. It's like, okay, cool, perfect. We're gonna run with that, and we'll move on to the next thing. So you get the players in there thinking about, okay, you failed that. Do you have any ideas on how you failed that? Any ways with the extra 2 threat you picked up? And then there's always the default mechanical stuff. One of the conversions is like, okay, you got an extra threat. Your character, though he accomplished the thing he was trying to do, took an extra strain point. He's exhausted by the effort of doing it, and he'll take 1 strain. Strain is, by the way, what's a good? Here you go. We'll use Shaw's stats here. Strain and wound are your 2 kind of health pools that you're operating in. Wound is obviously your cap. Once you hit that number of wounds, which is kind of like how much health you have, your character is going to be incapacitated. They're going to fall over dead. Strain, though, is a fun health pool where if you get hit with a stun shot setting, that's going to be strain damage, directly strain damage instead of wound damage. It's a way to incapacitate someone without killing them in combat. It's also, strain is kind of like your social health pool. So when you're trying to make deals and you're trying to talk, argue your point and using your social skills, you can almost use that as a health pool. You can use that as a health pool for almost social damage. As you have this really great charm roll or a negotiations roll or a lie or a deception, and that back and forth. It's a fun system that allows you to do a lot of things that don't always pertain to shooting at the other players, at NPCs. Sometimes other players. We've been down that road. That'd be a good episode, PvP. But that right there, everybody, is the narrative dice system. I want to go into a little bit more detail about the how I have found, and I'm curious how you guys have used this, the advantage and the threat, and how you've wrapped the different skills in there. What advantages have you given a player for rolling his negotiation skill? I know for me, we've knocked off credits. They've gotten even a better deal, or they've gotten a little perk, a little bonus or a benefit with whatever deal they're trying to make. Charm check. Had a few fun things to deal with that, with getting more people charmed by the attempt than just the one person you're talking to. Leadership is also a good way of doing that. A lot of this stuff, I know I've used advantage with just timing. Sometimes time and how much time the players have available to them to complete an objective. I like to use time caps. And so that means that when they do a athletics check for how far they have to run to do something, they'll knock off some of the time it would have taken per advantage, 10 minutes maybe. If it's a really long-term, hour-long thing they're doing, knocking that down 50% on time could be huge for the story if they've only got 2 hours to do something. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with the narrative dice and the advantages. But we might talk about that in another video. This was just a quick overview of the narrative dice system, some of the reasons why I love it. My biggest advice for you guys is don't get frustrated. Don't get frustrated with learning the system, especially if you're coming with the D20 system. I know it's a little bit more granular, and there's a lot more that you can do with it, but it also takes a lot more from you to do it. It's not as simple as just roll a D20 and yay or nay. It's a little bit more layered, but it's only as layered as you as the GM want it to be. So if you want to just go through some quick rolls, don't set setbacks in there. It's up to you. Your tone as the GM, it's your world. You wrap it the way you want to. But I, for one, take it as a challenge. Try to put those setbacks in there in almost every single roll, so the players get to use those talents that they bought. That's a big deal, because they'll find those talents useless if you don't put setbacks in there that make sense. There's always something holding us back, and it's fun to overcome those challenges. But we as GMs have to put those challenges forward for those players to overcome. Something I'm still struggling with, but we learn as we play. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see another particular topic, particularly about FFG, we're going to be going into detail on this one and some of the things that I've learned playing through this tabletop, or role-playing in general, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later, everybody.